Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Wide World of Motorsports. It is your host for today, the American, Damon Sawyer. And today we've got a really special guest. So, for the NASCAR Canada Series, they've got a new track on the schedule this year in 2025 in Calabogie Motorsports Park, July 26th to the 27th. You've seen us share a lot of content on this, and there's been a lot of local and regional drivers who have announced that they're going to make their first starts in the NASCAR Canada Series at this event. And joining me today is one of these drivers who has announced that a phenom in the making up in Canada. I have Connor Bell with me today. Connor, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure. I've seen the show here and there in the scene, and it's definitely a pleasure being welcome to this big community of NASCAR Canada. I'm looking forward to getting some racing done.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So, when we've seen a lot of announcements, as I mentioned, about local drivers who are going to be racing, and I would say the majority of these people are probably not going to be known to NASCAR Canada fans. Because the closest track is ICAR, and usually it's mostly the Quebecers who go to that race. You don't see a lot of the Ontario people even travel to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. So let's start from the beginning. Let's help fans kind of learn your story. So I was reading up on your website, and it does say that you did start in karting. That was kind of your start. But before even that, is your family? Do you come from a family of racers? Do you have like connections with the track? Where did the racing bug start with you?
Yeah, I'd say definitely a bit of a family thing for sure. My dad's been into racing for most of his life. He's actually um, was born in Brighton, if you're familiar. They've got a dirt track over there. So he started out with some stock car racing there as a young teenager, and like I said, did it for most of his life. So naturally, me, I'd say probably from the ages of 2 to 8, I was at the track every couple weekends in the summer, kind of trying to help out where I could. So kind of caught the bug there, and it's stuck with me since. And then of course, my dad wanted to get me and my brother into racing to kind of pass along the hobby. Um, and so we got into karting. I'd say I was around 8 or 9 years old when I stepped into a first proper kart. Um, did that for a couple years, never did anything too serious, like nothing at the national level, more just like regional, provincial type championships, stuff like that. Did pretty well, but I guess, like I said, never got to put myself up against those top drivers, so never really knew where I stood. And I think, with school ramping up a little bit around let's say 11, 12, sports. I was into soccer, hockey, all these things. I actually um, quit racing for a while, quit karting, I'd say for 2 to 3 years. And then that sort of brought me into COVID. And as everybody will know, everything kind of shut down. So I was looking for a sport to play. And as you know, Sims started booming in popularity, racing simulators around that time. So I decided to get one myself. That's still the one I have behind me now. But yeah, so got into the sim, started taking it really seriously. Um, got into some esports teams, won some championships, uh, realized I had caught the bug again for racing for the second time, and then decided, once COVID started sort of fizzling out, I was 15 then, and I jumped into my first real life track day, which was also at Calabogie. And this time it was in a prototype car, which was a little bit of a mistake thinking back for my first track day. It was a prototype one car that races in the SCCA. So it's, full carbon, 800 pounds, 230, 40 wheel horsepower. So the power to weight ratio was pretty crazy. Scared myself to death on my first track day. But for some reason, I still enjoyed it. And then sort of, I've kept going since then. And I'm sure we'll talk about my car racing career so far, but that's basically how I got started.
And so to kind of touch on the karting a little bit. So how you said you did mostly regional stuff. So for the listeners, like how many different tracks were you able to attend as doing your karting? How
I
how
think,
wide of a how wide did you get spread on that?
yeah, I think it was three tracks in the end that I mainly ran. So there's a regional championship called the OGKC, so the Ottawa Gatineau Karting Championship. That was mostly held at a track called Quillon, so just on the other side of Quebec. And also ran at a track called Lombardy, which is just outside of Ottawa, and then one right in Ottawa as well. So kind of jumped between the three different tracks. Um, yeah, I'd say those were the main ones. Never got out to Mosport or any of those bigger tracks.
Oh yeah, that's understandable. So kind of going through your career here, which is, it's pretty impressive how quickly you've jumped from doing the esports. You had your karting, and you took your break, then you came back to this. I see. Let's start with Miata. So the Miata series for so many different racers has become a baseline. And how did you get to run with anybody who's gone on to like, IMSA, these, regional NASCAR series? How much did you do of that?
Yeah, so it mostly that was basically the Miatas were the first you know, the first real racing season I ever entered was in a Miata. There's actually a great talking about Calabogie again, there's a great Spec Miata series there as well. There's actually 25 cars that come out every other week just on a weeknight to run a Miata race. So, what was great about that series is there's somebody at, every different skill level. So my first race, I was, mixing it up in the middle of the pack, learning racecraft, all that type of stuff. And I think that's what a spec racing series is great for is, it's same car, it's just down to the driver. Um, and I did around a season of that. It was mostly local drivers from Calabogie. One of the drivers who was similar in age to myself was Owen Clark. He ran last season in the Radical Cup Canada and has done some other Spec Miata racing in the US and the SCCA, stuff like that. So um, definitely was lots of competition, learned a lot there. And I think those skills definitely transferred over into the next series I went to go racing.
Yeah, and so I'm not skipping Super Production Challenge because you've done that for the last couple of years, it looks like on and off. But I'm curious about the test in 2023 that you got at Sebring in the Radical. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so that kind of came from Super Production Challenge, the team that I was running under for my first half season, basically that I did. They liked what they saw in the first couple events, and they were just getting into radicals at the time. That team, so they were basically short a driver going into Sebring over the winter. I think it was a January week so they invited me down, and basically it was I think 4 days of driving. There was a couple test days in there, a 6 hour race, and a 90-minute enduro. So what was great for me was I was having to adjust really quickly to a new car, a new track at the same time. So I developed a lot of skills doing that. And then I think what that was almost a breakthrough weekend for me in my career because I realized just how powerful the simulator was. I mean, I always knew it was powerful. I always knew it was, helpful to practice on the sim before you go into real life. But I'm going to say 1,000 laps on the simulator before I got there. And right away, like in the first session, it was my first time in that car, first time at the track. I was on pace and even quicker than the guys on the team. So, that's kind of the moment I realized you just got to drive it like the sim. um, so I'd say that was definitely a breakthrough weekend for me and something that got me hooked on the radicals for sure.
So okay, so speaking of the sim racing here, so when you say that you did 1,000 laps at Sebring on the iRacing, now we all know iRacing really is the pinnacle of sim racing. Even though I don't computer game, even I understand that. How well, like, what was the biggest thing when you went from the sim to the racetrack? What was the one thing that you would say that the sim could not prepare you for? I mean, I have a couple ideas what it could be, but I'm curious for yourself. What was the one thing that you maybe had to adjust when you drove it there in real life?
I'd say the one biggest thing is definitely the sense of speed. You just don't get that in the sim. You're obviously, not nervous at all in the sim, or at least much less than you are in real life. So everything comes at you a whole lot faster in real life, and it's kind of hard to expect that when you're driving on the sim. Just you're not feeling the violent bumps that Sebring has, all of that type of stuff. So I'd say the physicality of it and the sense of speed and the nerves, those would probably be the biggest things. And then, generally what I tell people is, you want to learn, you want to use the sim to try and, you know, uh, practice all of the fundamental driving skills that it takes to drive a race car. But what you don't want to do is, have exact braking references memorized in your head, exact bumps, because, these things can change. Yeah, iRacing is laser scanned, but that was probably 5 years ago when they scanned it. So a lot of these things can change. Grip levels can be different. So um, you just got to watch out how much you're taking over, but everything driving technique wise absolutely transfers over, which is pretty amazing.
And how was driving that Radical? Those look like some of the most fun cars. Like obviously, I think probably Miatas are probably the most fun car, but Radicals and all those like smaller open cockpit prototypes, they'll seem like just go karts on steroids. That's pretty
Exactly,
accurate.
exactly. Yeah, I would say pretty accurate. Um, you know, working on your first laps or your first session, it's really hard to trust the downforce. You almost can't believe the car can do what it can do. But once you start working up your pace, you can really see what it's capable of. And I think what's great about Radical is it's very approachable. So they're pretty easy to drive at the start. Finding the last little bits of pace is where it gets more difficult, but super approachable for a newer driver. I think Sebring was a bit of a daunting track for the first test, just with the bumps, because it is insanely physical. But yeah, I love Radicals. The racing is super close, being spec. So I'd say it's very, very close to Miata racing in terms of enjoyment.
Okay. And I see that you got a chance to race at Honda Indy in Toronto with the Radical series. So how was that only your second time in that car, I assume, was at that that's two wildly different tracks, but at the same time, maybe some similarities. They're both flat and Sebring's obviously not a street course, but kind of with the concrete and everything. I feel like that's probably a bit closer of a transition from there to a street course as opposed to maybe running at Calabogie and then trying to go to a street course or something. How did obviously they were very different, but were you able to take any similarities at all? It's like how the feedback from the track and the car to you, was there any similarities that you could pick up on?
Yeah, I would say definitely a lot of similarities. I had an idea already of how the car would handle over the bumps. Sebring being very bumpy, the Indy being insanely bumpy in some areas. Um, I think, like you said, Sebring is technically not considered a street course, but a lot of those corners do have walls that come up really quickly. So I think the same mindset definitely applied to how you approach those first, couple sessions. Um, I think, the Indy was almost a year after my first time in a Radical, so I wasn't completely up to pace right away compared to the other drivers that have been doing the whole, season leading up to that. So it was an experience. I mean, there was a lot I would do differently about that weekend, but still got some decent results and can't complain. I mean, I was super grateful to be there. That's for sure.
Yeah, it says that you scored a podium on that race. Like that's, how many people were in the field for that event?
So that race was interesting because it was the first time, I believe, for the North American Cup to come to Canada as well. So it
Okay.
was the Canadian series, which I believe was around 15 drivers, all the same, motor class of Radical. And
Mhm.
then the US series came with like 30 or 35 cars, which was pretty crazy. Three different classes. So they've got the SR10, which is like 400 and some horsepower. They've got both SR3 classes with the different motors. So there's, I think, almost 50 of us on track, which gets pretty crazy on a street circuit with the prototypes. Um, yeah, definitely very chaotic at times. There's a lot of crashes that weekend.
Now, was that, I'm trying to recall here. James was actually at Honda Indy. I think he was at this Sunday. Now, didn't they have issues with the track coming up in one of the corners?
Yes, I believe so. I remember something like that. I think because they repaved the final sector just before the race weekend, and which was, in my opinion, poorly done because the second last corner you'd come up over the apex and it was like an absolute hill. It was almost a mountain. So the radical would bottom out and stuff. It was a bit of a challenge to work around. So I do remember something about the track coming up though.
I feel like with a lot of these street circuits, that happens quite a bit. So, speaking of large fields and having to deal with like the traffic that a 50 car field on a 2 mile road course like Toronto is Expedition Place. So the Super Production Challenge, I have seen some of those races at CTMP, and the first couple events that I saw, they brought like 50 plus cars, which fits a little better on CTMP, but that's still, and they had several classes of cars. So let's talk about that. It looks like, kind of reading here, it was a bit of feast or famine. Either you were winning or you were having some sort of mechanical failure, which, that is certainly racing. You know, would you rather do that or, run just mid pack all the time? It's hard to say on that. How do you feel that running this, like, do you feel like that was a natural next step? And, maybe obviously we'll talk about the NASCAR Canada stuff here, but with a couple years in super production and then with this radical, do you think maybe the next step might be the FEL, like one of those kind of series as well on top of NASCAR? Or like, how, I guess I got a lot of questions on this. So let's I guess first let's talk about that time in super production. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fun is that series? And because a lot of it seems to be in Quebec. It's mostly Quebec drivers, maybe a couple people from like Nova Scotia, I thought I saw. But how's it like as a, you know, Anglo-Saxon running in that series and in a mostly Quebec-based series? Let's start there.
Yeah, the Super Production Challenge was just a fantastic series. I mean, the amount of racing you get for the budget that goes in is just unheard of compared to any other series in Canada. And the fact that you can run as a support series to the NASCAR Canada Series, to FEL, all those other fantastic series, makes it, almost a no-brainer coming out of a lower level series like the Miatas or something. So I'd say the series was great. My experience as a driver was sometimes a 10, sometimes a 1 or a 0 if I could do that. Um, as you said, you know, when I had a reliable car, we were winning races, podiums, all that stuff. And then when the Subaru BRZ I was driving decided to have issues, some caused by the car, some caused by us. When it decided to have issues, it was lower on that 1 out of 10 spectrum. um, so I'd say, I did 2.5 years of Super Production Challenge. I've probably cost myself the championship all 3 years because of mechanical failures. Even in the first season, where I only did a half season, actually could have won as well just based off of how well my first weekend went, and then my second weekend as well. Had issues in the finale. 2023, there was mechanical issues in the first round. We somehow still came out with the championship lead, and then slowly lost it as the season went on. This year had some really good showings, but lots of issues as well with, wiring, trying to do crazy stuff with the motors to keep up with the more powerful cars in my class, stuff like that. So we were trying a lot of stuff to keep up car wise. Didn't always work out, but had a ton of fun in that series, and I think it's developed me a lot as a driver.
And that's not, like you said, that's what a lot of these series are for, and to get a lot of bang for your buck when when the car's working. That's definitely, it's harder to come by, I feel like, for a lot of these racing series now. So we covered a lot of your steps here, and this is a huge step to come to the NASCAR Canada Series. So it was interesting, we had talked about off air, there's a how many local drivers are going to be set up, and so you said some of them bought their own cars, some are renting from the track, which I want to talk about later. But you have scored yourself probably the best ride of them all with a DJ Kennington prepared car. So let's talk about how long has that been in the works? So, like, was it the moment that you heard that they were coming to Calabogie, you guys got right on the phone? Have you been looking to jump up to NASCAR, maybe iCar or something like that? And so there was already some connections. How did this all get started to make a connection to get this start?
So, before anything was announced, even we're talking 2 years ago, I think I had written somewhere for a team as a testimonial on their website. Basically, one of the questions was, "What's your bucket list series to race in?" And one of those two series was the NASCAR Canada Series. So it's always been something I've been dreaming to do. I think that was it. Basically, if you do a race in the NASCAR Canada Series, you can call it quits if you need to, and I'll feel accomplished as a driver just because I've always wanted to do it. So started a couple years ago, and then actually after last season 2024 in the super production challenge, I actually thought about quitting racing for a while, just because things hadn't been, actually not necessarily because things hadn't been going my way, but I'm in university, racing's expensive, all that stuff. So we'd actually put both of our Subarus up for sale, um you know trying to get out of it for a few years essentially. And conveniently, NASCAR Canada Series comes out with the schedule for the 2025 season. I would say in December ish, roughly around then. And of course, one of those on the schedule was Calabogie Motorsports Park. So, right there, I started talking to my dad. We started going back and forth and decided we wanted to do this. Being that it's my home track, I've probably got hundreds, if not thousands, of laps at Calabogie. So if I'm gonna do it, I might as well do it where I've got my best shot at getting a good finish. So basically, we went all in. Been working for 3 or 4 months on sponsorship, trying to get supporters on board, partners on board to help us make it there. And I think we got to a point where where we realized we're going to make it work. So we were looking around for teams at the time, met with a few different shops. Basically, obviously being from Ottawa, we didn't just want to have a phone call. We wanted to go in and look at all these shops and kind of see what everything looked like. So I'd say we took a trip up to Toronto, went to about 4 or 5 shops in the day, and one of those was DJ's shop. Uh, and we love what we saw. So I think as soon as we got there and left, we sort of knew if he's got a seat available, that's who we want to go with.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience. Whenever, like, we have the maritime races, he usually has a couple cars out for rent there. So I did see that you had released when you released your video, you had said, sponsors and a livery. Is there any updates on that you can share?
So we're just finalizing. Actually, today we were finalizing the last couple of details. So I don't think I'm quite ready to announce sponsors just yet. But the livery we have planned, I'll give a hint. It's definitely a Cup Series throwback livery, a
Okay.
really old throwback. We'll leave it at that.
Oh, well, it was just throwback weekends, Darlington. So it's a good,
There you
yeah,
go.
good time to talk about that. Can you say what number it's going to be? Is that,
That'll be a giveaway. That'll be a
that
giveaway. So I can't.
oh, okay. Yeah, that's fair. We're always media. We're always trying to fish for details. What can I say? So, all right, let's say that this goes well. Or even is decent. What would be the next step? Let's say, you said there's six local drivers, road courses pull 20 plus cars. I'm just going to throw a number. I don't think we're going to get 12 Riviere numbers, 34, 35 cars, but I'm thinking we could probably pull 27 to 30 cars for this race.
For sure.
Let's, you know, let's say we can pull that and you finish, top 15, top 20. So what's the next step? Like,
Um, I'd say, yeah, depending on where I finish, I'm gonna have all the partners at the race, so I want to show them a good time and definitely finish well. So I think, uh, if things go well with my partners, which I'm totally expecting them to, um, hopefully we can start developing more long-term relationships that will allow me to run more races. I think I'm sort of realistic with it. I know it's tough to make a career in racing. Not a whole lot of people can make it work. So, I'm in university, got a career developing there, but hey, if I can make it work, why not? So we'll kind of see where things play out. I don't have any like dead set plans at the moment, but it would be really cool if I could run like multiple road courses a year. I think that's definitely my specialty. I've never done an oval race before. So not sure how I'd stack up there, but I'm coming in with a relative amount of confidence for the road course side of things.
yeah. Well, I mean, hey, the ovals, it's a good place to learn some of those tracks like Delaware and Sunset, and then even Montmagny. Like, I don't know, those look pretty fun. So, and then like a couple of those Quebec tracks not too far from you. But so all right, that makes all sense there. And I'm seeing here as well, you also have plans for the Radical series in 2025. Is that correct? Like, what else is on the docket for you that you can announce other than just NASCAR Canada here in 2025?
Yeah, so right now the only thing that's set for this season is that one race in NASCAR at Calabogie. There was talks about doing a radical season um, with some help from some partners as well. Unfortunately, that didn't go quite or didn't come into play totally. But we'll see. I'll keep my eyes open for the opportunities. And like I said, if I can make these partners happy at the NASCAR race, who knows where it'll lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. There's gonna be a lot of eyes at this event. So, uh, speaking of the track, so I know a lot of people. Like, it's funny. So, like I said, I live only a couple hours from Calabogie, so I'm aware. I've been wanting to go to this track for a while, so I'm excited now that we got a chance to do this. But I know a lot of people weren't overly familiar with Calabogie, so we got a few minutes left. Let's talk about the track here. How, you know, how does this track drive? Like, you've driven a lot of tracks on a simulator, and you've driven this track in real life, of course. What's a track out there in the world that you've driven on the simulator that maybe that Calabogie would kind of remind you of in terms of like its flow and how it feels?
I'd say if you or anybody listening has ever driven Barber Motorsports Park, it's very, very similar. It's actually the same track designer as Barber Motorsports Park, and a lot of the tracks down in the States are designed by the same guy. So it's got the same curbing, similar elevation change. Um, might be a little bit more narrow, but there's a lot of attributes that are similar. It could be compared to an iCar, but bigger and more elevation change. So I'd say a mix of those two is how I would describe it.
Okay. Looking at like some of the photos and stuff, it kind of remind me a bit of Mont Tremblant. Have you ever had a chance to race on that track?
Never in real life, but I have watched a lot of videos from Tremblant. I'd say it's similar in many ways, but not quite the same amount of elevation. Tremblant's got a lot of like massive crests and compressions and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely similar in many ways.
Okay. Yeah. And you had said that the track will be, renting, it has cars that they are renting to people. So is that like a big thing that they do is like track rent, like not just like track rentals for other cars, but like they have a fleet of cars of a lot of different series? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, somewhat. So the track has a lot of race cars that you can rent, sports cars, stuff like that. They don't quite have any NASCAR Canada Series cars, but some of the shops that are at the track, basically, there's two main shops or race teams that have like their
Mhm.
headquarters within like the track, the paddock.
Yeah.
So they're going to be fielding several cars. I know one of the shops there has already confirmed three entries. Another one is one confirmed, maybe two, and then myself as well. So there's going to be at least six cars there, and I think a lot of them have bought cars as well. So they're definitely in it for multiple races or multiple years to come.
Wow. No, that's yeah, that's impressive. And yeah, that definitely would, with iCar just being right there. And maybe this is the push, with a lot of you guys picking cars up to get Shannonville. I would love to see Shannon. I mean, I think they would need to do some work at the track there, but that would be for me, that'd be convenient. Shannonville, Calabogie, iCar, like just like and even like well for me, CTMP isn't that far away. It's just like a 3 hour drive. You just get on the 401 and go. So it's really not too bad of a drive. So you know, that might be a good one to have a huge field of Ontario drivers. Love to see that. What do you think about running at CTMP?
I think it'd be amazing, even in slower speed cars. It's quite the track, so I can't imagine a 600 horsepower NASCAR Canada Series car ripping around there. It must be a blast.
It, yeah, it does look it. So real quick before we go here, who would you like to thank for getting to this point in your racing career and for taking, this next step? Who would you like to give thanks to?
I'd say the whole family, really. For supporting me through this journey, allowing me to race while still in school and stuff like that. Um, DJ Kennington for welcoming us to the series. And even some of the organizers at NASCAR Canada have been really welcoming to me, back and forth, getting me all set up with my licensing. And then you guys, I would say, for having me on here. I really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to getting out on track.
Oh, well, we appreciate that and great hearing from you. So thank you so much, Connor Bell, for joining us today on the Wide World of Motorsports podcast. We'll have this interview up and you can wherever you get your podcast and be sure to tune in. We'll have more content with him and other drivers from Calabogie here coming up in these coming months, and we'll see you at the racetrack. Take care.